another minute.
Today is May 24th. Help me out, guys. May 24th.
It is.
Richard Panek, the 4% Universe, and my co-host Phil McCoy from Winchester. Not living in Winchester, but from Winchester. A familiar face in Winchester.
Thanks,
Welcome to the show,
Thank
Phil.
you. Thanks, Joe. Nice being here.
I want to start off, Richard. You are at some kind of a conference.
Yes, I'm in Boston actually for the American Astronomical Society conference, which is a twice-a-year event, and this is the summer event. It's held in various cities, and this is Boston's turn.
So they have two a year. So
they do.
And there's one in the summer. When's the next one? Like
January.
Okay. So they're bunched up pretty.
Yeah, they used to be more toward the end of May, but then it ran into Memorial Day, and people wouldn't come, and so.
And what do people generally do at the hotel for these events?
Oh, well, there are conferences all day, going on all day long. There are, discussions. People are presenting new findings. Somebody from NASA will come in and give a presentation to everybody about what the funding situation looks like. So it's political, but it's mostly scientific. It's mostly people just presenting their latest results.
Interesting. And then people network, of course.
Of course, yeah.
That's half the fun.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So when did the book come out, The 4% Universe?
In January of this year.
Okay.
Yeah.
So have you been doing other interviews and such?
Oh yeah. I was I was on the West Coast for a while. That was a lot of fun. Seattle, San Francisco, and then I was in Washington. It was great. It was great. And I live in New York, so I've done some events there as well. But my publisher is in Boston, and when I saw that the Houghton Mifflin, and when I saw that the American Astronomical Society meeting was going to be here, I thought, well, there's a perfect excuse for me to get astronomy done, get publicity done, visit with my publisher, and So.
Oh, good. So you get to hang out with Perseus.
With Perseus?
I'm sorry. No,
Houghton Mifflin.
Houghton Mifflin.
Yes.
Oh, they're gonna get me for that one. No, I forget. There's Little Brown here. There's all sorts of fun stuff. Sorry about that, people. You have other books out. The Invisible Century.
Yes.
Einstein, Freud, and the Search for Hidden Universes, which I'd like to touch upon a little later.
Good.
And then there's this lovely one, Seeing and Believing, which this one got the treadmill treatment at the gym. I bring it to the gym. But I also brought this book, The View from the Center of the Universe, Joel R. Panek and Nancy Ellen Abrams. And I like they have this all matter and energy, and I found it fascinating. A pyramid. Mm-hmm. And they've this whole concept of like our universe being only 4%.
Of everything we've always thought was the universe. This studio, our Earth, stars, sun, galaxies, all of that is only 4% of the mass and energy in the universe, turns out, which I think is a fairly extraordinary discovery, and it's just happened recently. So,
dark energy, cold dark matter, invisible atoms. That's what this fellow has here.
Right.
And it's staggering because as a kid, you wake up and you're thinking, okay, I'm playing with my rocks, and this is 100% of my world.
Right.
This is everything.
Yeah.
And then we get older and it expands, and there's inner worlds and outer worlds, but 4%.
Yeah. Well, that's, it's not just when you're a kid and you're playing with rocks. It's when you're an astronomer and you're playing with stars and planets. So this was quite a shock to the system when there was evidence coming in for dark matter in the 1970s, and then the evidence for dark energy in the late 1990s. So there's been this kind of seismic shift in the community, and I was fortunate enough to see it happening, which is why I wanted to write a book about it. It's one of these subjects that you hear about once in a while, if you read the science pages in the newspaper or something, but and that's all that coverage is well and good and is necessary, but I felt that there wasn't a book out there yet that had really put it into some kind of context, some kind of historical context, so people are going, oh, there's not just this discovery or this discovery or this discovery, but there's this huge shift going on in the way that we think about the universe.
And my understanding from reading the book, Richard, was the genesis of this discovery came about with observations of radio waves and the acceleration of mass or expansion of the universe. And I find it to be very interesting that as that evidence has evolved, this theory now has taken, I guess, preeminence in some respects over the existing train of thought, or the earlier train of thought, that really everything emanated from one point, so from one, I guess, singularity of mass and expanses.
That still
works in with that
it does,
dark
yes.
matter issue.
Yes, it's just a matter. It's just a question of these other elements that we're talking about, dark matter and dark energy, would have been present from the beginning as well, from that singularity that you mentioned.
So that singularity would, if that the conventional kind of Big Bang that we all think of, that still is consistent with this theory.
It's consistent with this theory.
Yeah.
And one of the things that surprised me in writing the book, I hadn't anticipated this, but that I realized that in writing about dark matter and dark energy, I was also going to have to think about the Big Bang. And the evidence for the Big Bang, the kind of compelling evidence for it, is as recent as the 1960s, the mid-1960s. And that's when cosmology went kind of from speculation or metaphysics into science and physics. And that's within my lifetime. And that's, so there's this whole new idea of the universe, this kind of validation of the Big Bang idea within my lifetime. But then within that, as you were saying, there are these other components that were completely unanticipated.
And the as I was reading some of the information early on in the book, kind of the evolution of this theory, is that initially there was an observation of radio waves and the lengths of the radio waves, and a recognition that ultimately our world, or our visible world, is expanding and expanding at an accelerated rate. Correct?
Yes, that's dark energy. Right.
This is the dark energy,
Yeah.
in effect, drawing that acceleration. Where
Right.
I think the original theory was it more on the idea that the bang itself was propelling rather than something else drawing, so to speak.
Well, yeah, the idea would be
movement.
that what's commonly called the Big Bang, it's a little bit of a misnomer in that there wasn't really a bang. There was an expansion of space, and it didn't go boom. It just expanded.
Expanded, yeah.
And it still is expanding. But the question was, if you have a universe that's full of matter, and the matter is gravitationally interacting with all the other matter, you would think that, okay, the universe is expanding, and the question is it going to slow down, eventually just kind of peter out, which means that there's not enough matter to bring it all back together, or is there so much matter that it's just going to collapse back on itself after a certain point?
Yep.
And that's what they were trying to determine when they discovered dark energy, and that idea is that it's expanding and then it's speeding up. And if it's speeding up, then there's something that is stronger than gravity, or counteracting gravity on a cosmic level. And that turns out to be 72% of the mass and energy in the universe, and that's dark energy, and they don't know what it is, but that's kind of it in a nutshell.
You say the race to discover the rest of reality. So who is engaging in this race? The people at the convention?
Some of them, yes.
Yeah.
Definitely. The ideas that are propelling a lot of astronomy right now, dark energy is probably, that's because it's so new and so radical. People have been really doing a lot of research on that in the last 10 years. But dark matter as well. With dark matter, we don't know what it is, and so people are trying to detect it, but they have some candidates. They think it might be this, they think it might be that, hypothetical particles, and they'll try to detect those. But dark energy, it's not that we don't know what it is. We don't even know what it's like at this point. So there's not even that question is kind of off the table for the moment. They're just trying to figure out, is whatever this dark energy is it uniform over space and time, or does it change over space and time? Right now, the evidence seems to be that it's uniform over space and time. But that's what a lot of these people who are at this convention are working on, definitely.
Wow. It's mind-boggling to think of all these minds all buzzing about this.
Yeah, it's thrilling, yeah.
Phil is really up on this, and I'm not going to step on your toes because I do want questions from you, but I do have a question for our audience to consider. Star Wars, of course, made the dark side and the light side, bringing people to the dark side. Do lay people confuse the dark side with dark matter?
First of all, if lay people know about dark matter, that's an achievement in itself. If they've heard the words.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah. Beyond that, how people conceive of it, I suppose that some people do make that association. I've had people say to me, "I know what dark matter is. It's the Lord," and you go, "Well, okay." So there is that kind of confusion. I've also had people say to me, I was introduced to somebody once. I was visiting Antarctica for the research for the book, and my escort was introducing me to some people at breakfast and said, "Did you know that we're only 4% of the universe, and 72% of it is dark energy, and 23% of it, 22% of it is dark matter?" And somebody sitting at the table said, and she turned to me and said, and he's writing a book on it. And somebody at the table said, "How do you know?" So people they can feel threatened by this as well. I mean, that's what I learned from that. And the honest answer to that was, I don't know. I'm not a scientist. I just do the research. But I've seen the scientists. When you come up with a discovery that's so counterintuitive, you try to knock it down. I mean, you don't sit there and say, "Oh, I've discovered something." I mean, crackpots do that. They say, "Oh, I've discovered something that nobody else has ever thought of."
I just discovered there's media escorts in Antarctica. I mean, I would never have imagined. No, I'm serious.
Well, no, it wasn't a media escort. It was the National Science Foundation.
Okay.
Had somebody who
there we
would
go.
help me out a little bit. No, a media escort in Antarctica, that would be fun.
Well, Antarctica is 4% of the world.
Is it? You don't you're just.
I'm just the host. I'm having fun and learning. I'll shut up and
But
learn.
it's interesting on some of these theories, and you probably have an insight on this. A little bit of it is there's some difficulty in advancing some of these theories within the scientific community also.
Oh, yeah.
Where you have to have a certain, I don't pretend to know the protocol, you may be more attuned to it, but you have to be careful on how you present your thoughts and present your positions to kind of gain acceptance in the right areas, and how does that impact some of these theories? Are there theories out there that may have some, alternative validity, but just haven't got out in the mainstream yet, or?
Yeah, there are a lot of. I think about these kinds of questions a lot. Actually, the sociology of science. I've talked to some older cosmologists who were still resisting the idea of the Big Bang, for instance, and it's not they were saying the Big Bang was wrong. They were just saying, let's not be so quick to accept it. Well, that's fine if you're 80 years old and half of your life was spent without the Big Bang, but if you're 40 years old or 50 years old and you grew up with the Big Bang, it's no longer so much a question of, is it valid? Because you've seen the evidence, you've seen it validated again and again and again and again, and so you don't really question it. So there really is it's a matter of one generation dying off almost. And there were a couple of cosmologists last year who were they were both 84 and they died. And I thought, okay, some of those ideas are going with them. That they were the last bastion resisting certain things.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. But but to go back to your question about how things are presented, the discovery of the evidence for dark energy took place in the 1990s, and two teams were racing each other to get to the answer, and they both independently came up with this counterintuitive result that the expansion isn't slowing down, that the expansion is speeding up somehow, and so of course, since you're racing the other guy, you don't want to be the one to come out and say something that's completely absurd. So they had to have many, many internal checks before they went public, and they didn't know what the other team was going to be doing. And so the fact that these two intensely competitive and within the community famously competitive teams had both come up with the counterintuitive answer was actually sociologically very compelling to a lot of their peers. I mean, I think that it accelerated the acceptance of the idea, or if not the acceptance, at least the need to take it seriously.
Are they racing for funding? Are they racing for the notoriety?
well, I don't know about the notoriety, the fame, the prestige. You know, it turns out that dark energy will almost certainly win a Nobel. So there's a lot of discussion now. There's the conflict that I talked about, the racing each other in the 90s, continues to a certain extent today as the two teams are, you know, there have already been some preliminary major prizes in science and physics that have gone to dark energy kind of in the run-up to the Nobel, sort of like the Golden Globes, you know, going before the Oscars. And people are generally giving both teams credit and saying, okay, we'll give a prize to that guy from that team and that guy from that team. But it's still not certain, and the Nobel Committee has sometimes surprised people with their choices in physics, which is the category that this would go into. So I think that there's a lot of nervousness, and there's a lot of wanting to make sure that the right people get credit. Not that there is necessarily a right person, but that if you're that person, you feel that you're the right person. So there still is a lot of grumbling under the surface. And that's in the book as well, yeah.
I get for our audience again, too, the movie Twister has two competing teams going for the who's going to get the fame for, you know, getting inside the tornadoes.
Right, right.
But I think that shows the audience that there's this real competitiveness in science that you don't really think of when you read a book.
Well, that's one of the things that that you know, if I can say this, I think sets this book apart from a lot of other science books out there, in that it does show the human side. And I was talking, because I'm at this convention this week, this astronomy convention. I was talking to an astronomer the other day who was on one of the two teams, and he was saying, you know, he said, you just don't. He said, this is actually what science is like. This is how it works. You do have these people competing. That it's not just, oh, there's this objective truth out there, and we're all working together and we're going to find it. You know, that there is this human element of you want to be the first. And you mentioned funding. Funding is part of it, but you know, fame,
the prize,
posterity. You know, that your name will live on. I mean, it's always there's this kind of conflict. I think the paradox that these people who are discovering how meaningless we are want to have posterity. You know? it's like, you know,
that is an amazing thing.
and they're quite adamant about it. You know,
it's like a bunch of ants in an anthill.
Yeah.
Want to be the chief
humans.
ant.
Right. Yeah. I discovered humans.
That's right, exactly.
Yeah. They've always been there.
Yeah. Right.
Well, not always, but you know,
Yeah.
It is kind of a trip, and it's a trip through the universe. If we can kind of slide over to the invisible century,
Yeah.
I like that you did something on Einstein, Freud, and the search for hidden universes. What does Freud, a psychologist, have to do with?
Oh, okay. Well, this book, the idea of it is that it's kind of a precursor to the current book in a way.
And what year was it?
This was 2004.
Okay.
The idea behind the book was that at the end of the 19th century, the scientific revolution was 300 years old or so at that point, and Newton's ideas were 200 and some odd years old. And so the idea of there being this kind of cause and effect universe where everything could be explained through you know, just a very small number of equations, that you could have all the matter, all the motion, all the cause, all the effect, explain everything, was reaching a point at the end, at the turn of the 20th century, where there's a question of how much more is there to discover out there. And in the external universe, the one that's out there, up in the heavens or around us, the idea was one of the compelling ideas at the time was the ether, which was that there was some kind of medium out there that light would travel, that carried light along, like water, like, you know, the equivalent of water on a universal scale. On the interior universe, the internal universe, the psychological one, there was the idea that if we could just map the neurons and the connections and the cell connections, that we would be able to understand all of consciousness. And Freud did a lot of work on that. Actually, he was a neuroanatomist before he was a psychologist. And so a lot of that book actually deals with the science of that period. Somebody like Freud doing neuroanatomy, neurobiology, and tracing the connections in the brain, the physical, the chemical reactions and everything, tracing that and thinking at one point, oh, I think I've got it. I think I know how it all works. And it's not enough. It doesn't explain what we would now, what came to be called the unconscious. It couldn't account for that in the same way that the ether couldn't account for everything. And so you have the external universe and the internal universe, and these people who are Einstein and Freud, who are kind of pushing the boundaries and saying, all right, what can we know everything? Are we really at the limits of our understanding? And they're trying to figure that out. And what they each do is figure out, oh no, there's this whole other thing out there. That if you take away the ether, for instance, then you have then you have the speed of light being finite as the key to special relativity and general relativity. And 20th century physics begins at that point. Freud's ideas on the unconscious, he gets a lot of criticism, and some of it is justified, but it was certainly changed the nature of the discussion.
There's a Hermetic philosopher, Hermes Trismegistus, Hermetic philosophy, hermits.
Mm-hmm.
He basically says that it's God's dream. God's imagination is what we're living in. And science and the spirit world seem to be connecting. Isn't it almost obvious that there is this world of imagination or dreams that is just totally separate from the finite world? And so maybe there's something out there that this dark matter, dark energy, maybe it's the place of dreams, who knows, where this whole other world. Well,
with all
you talk about the
I am your guest, I understand.
You understand where I'm going, and I said it in a crude way.
Yeah.
The subconscious is this unmapped, uncharted territory.
Yes, definitely.
Where anything goes,
Right.
where, quantum physics,
Right.
Quantum Leap,
Yeah. Yes.
the TV show.
Yes.
So does that dream world factor into the physical things that scientists look at? Do they factor in this whole phenomena?
I get a little cautious when we start talking about things like spiritual, because part of the scientific method, the purpose of the scientific method was to say there is superstition out there. There are things that we can't explain that are supernatural, that they are super as in beyond nature, and we don't know what they are. But instead of saying that, instead of making up the reasons why they're there, whether it's God or whatever, or it's spirit world, saying, okay, let's just see how far we can push our physical understanding of it. So you just keep on pushing back against the supernatural, and you keep eliminating it. So when people start to conflate the two, I kind of go, but that's not science in this really fundamental way, because you're really trying to say, what can I explain without invoking anything else? If you want to invoke anything else, that's fine, but that's not science. That's something else.
I just bring it up because the lay people out there
No, I think it's a great question.
who hear it
Yeah.
are going to press back against you.
Uh-huh.
Like you said, that person said, it's the Lord.
Yeah,
That's on their minds.
right.
And I'm just here asking
Yeah.
the questions
Yeah, no,
to see where scientists and writers go.
I think it's a valid question. And it's one that I've given a lot of thought to about what is the purpose of science and this whole idea that people want to bring something spiritual into the discussion. And I just think it just comes from a fundamental misunderstanding of what science is trying to do, which is to say, let's only deal with nature, let's only deal with the natural, and let's not deal at all with the supernatural, something that isn't in nature, that isn't verifiably, empirically in nature.
Even if it turns out we're living in a virtual reality in the Matrix.
There you go. Could be.
There was an interesting quote that you actually had in the 4% universe that it kind of goes along the same line of thinking. You were talking about cosmology in Plato, and you were saying what Plato wanted instead was an approximation of knowledge. He wanted his students to find the math to match not the facts but the appearances.
Right.
And one of the things I thought was interesting about that, and I did a little bit of thinking on it, is that I always had this idea that, we tend to develop, obviously, all of our theories and our approximations by our physical proximity in the universe. So we're in one small planet kind of looking out on the cosmos. And I often wonder, you know, how much of a window on reality we really have. Or do we maybe delude ourselves into thinking we have a window of reality and then ultimately try to build a mathematical model for that, and as we find and evolve, maybe that reality is skewed to one sense? How does that affect you think the scientific method of, you know, whether it pertains to dark energy or the idea of the cosmos or anything? How do you think our physical location in the universe impacts that, if any?
Yeah, I think that that scientists want to be surprised. They like to be surprised. And I was talking with somebody who's in the book, who's one of the leaders of the two teams that discovered the evidence for dark energy in the 1990s. And he and I were going for a walk in the Berkeley Hills, and we were talking about this kind of question, and he was saying that it's like we're looking out a window and something is passing in front of the window, and we're going, oh, that's our reality. But there's, you know, but who knows what's beyond the window frame? And another time he gave me another example. You know, according to quantum theory, virtual particles are popping into and out of existence all the time, and this has actually been demonstrated. You know, I mean, that's mind-blowing. And he said, it's like we're sitting here because we can't see this, because we don't have the means for seeing this. He said, it's like we're sitting here reading a newspaper and there's a carnival going on around us. Right. So it's that kind of idea. Yeah. But that's not to say that we can't quantify the newspaper. You know,
exactly.
That we, you know,
the relevance of the newspaper is another question.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. But to the extent that we can also quantify or verify the virtual particles or the dark matter and the dark energy. You know, as I said earlier, it's like, you know, these are so counterintuitive that the scientists have to convince themselves. They have to try to knock down the theory. Yeah. And I've seen them, and it's in the book, you know, where they're trying to knock down the theory again and again and again, and they can't. And at a certain point you go, there's something here. There's something to this. And maybe instead of knocking it down, maybe we can figure out a way to shape it better, to massage it better, and get a better understanding of it. And that's what they've been doing in recent years.
Fascinating. I want to take us back to this book. What year was this?
1998.
Seeing and Believing was 1998. And you had one before it?
Yes, that was not about science. It was about the attempts of a dying Midwestern industrial town to hang on to their minor league baseball franchise. It was called Waterloo Diamonds, Waterloo, Iowa.
Oh, wow. And so what publisher did you get that on?
That was St. Martin's.
Oh, so you were on St. Martin's, and then
this was Viking. And
Penguin, this one.
Viking Penguin.
Okay,
Viking is a division of Penguin.
Oh, and then this is Viking.
And this is Viking Penguin too. And now this is Houghton Mifflin Harcourt.
Here in Boston.
Yes.
Which is great. Did they come over to the hotel, the publishers or any of the people?
No, but I know that this is being taped, but it's a Tuesday, and tonight I'm giving a talk at the Center for Astrophysics at Harvard, the Harvard Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics, and the editor and publicist will be at that.
Oh, great. Will you videotape that? Oh, I would imagine.
I don't know.
I just think these are all important, even though we might not matter to
we matter
the other
we matter
96%. Right. I like people documenting things. I'm glad we're documenting you today. Oh. It's an honor. Well, it really is. You've done a lot of work. 4 books. 1 book is a lot of work.
I'm not disagreeing.
What was the feeling going from writing about Waterloo, Iowa, and a baseball team to Seeing and Believing?
Well, what happened there is an editor who liked my first book, Waterloo Diamonds, wanted to work with me on a book. And she would call me up periodically and say, do you want to do a book on this? I don't know if you remember Governor Pataki in New York.
Sure.
Republican. This was in the mid-90s. She called me up one day and said, do you want to ghostwrite his autobiography? And I looked at the phone and I said, you don't really know me, do you? And she called up another time and said, do you want to do a book on the history of the telescope? And it was almost the same Pataki kind of response, right? You know, I said, I don't know anything about science. I don't have a background in science. I don't like science. I never liked science. And the idea of doing, a 700-page book with 500 footnotes that would take me 8 years to research on a piece of technology sounds like death. And she said, no, think of it as an essay. I thought, well, I've written essays, so I'll do a little research. And as I did the research, I realized that that it's not so much, I mean, it is the science that interests me, but it's really the history and the philosophy of science, how ideas, how our concepts of ourselves change in relationship to these discoveries. So, you know, I didn't know, I didn't know a lot of fundamental historical and philosophical matters until I started doing the research for this book. And I thought, this is great. It's like I'm going back to college, except I'm finally old enough to appreciate it, you know. And I didn't have any student loans. I was getting paid for it.
Were you doing cosmology before this book, or did this book introduce you to it?
That was it. That was the
so
beginning.
you really had a career change.
Yeah. Well, I stayed as a writer. The day before I started working on that book, my wife and I and the kids went for a walk. And I said, so it was a Sunday night. She said, so what are you working on tomorrow? I said, tomorrow I've wrapped up everything else I need to do. Tomorrow I start working on the book. And she said, well, are you nervous? And I said, I'm kind of excited because it's like I'm beginning, you know, I've done all this writing. I have a background in journalism, and I have a background in fiction as well. I published some short stories, and I have a degree from the Iowa Writers Workshop. So I understand both of these forms. I thought, okay, what I can do here and what I've done now in all of these books is kind of take that approach of research, the journalistic approach, and kind of wed it to the narrative storytelling elements of fiction, keeping everything true, of course, but you know, kind of using that kind of framework. And once I understood that, then I thought it's just like anything else I could write. It doesn't need to be daunting. It doesn't need to be scary. I can understand it if I try to understand it on the way that the people who do the work needed to understand it. I mean, it comes out, it's a very human endeavor. And once I saw it in those terms, like the whole idea of how I could write about science changed. That it doesn't need to be dry and technology driven, that it can be, it's a human narrative, and it has the same elements as any other narrative.
That you're speaking at the Harvard Smithsonian,
Yeah.
That's prestigious.
Oh.
And you know, and you've, it's amazing. You've done this research and you're being respected for it.
Tell my 16-year-old that.
Well, kids are a whole other thing. They know Daddy has books out.
Yeah,
that impresses them, right?
Yeah, and my wife is a writer, and everybody we know is a writer. So our bookshelves are just filled with friends. You know, it's like I suppose that if you grow up, you know, in Hollywood or something, and you're, you know, I don't know, Bruce Willis's kid or something. You know, it's like, you know, oh, that person, that Pulitzer winner is over for dinner. You know, who cares? If you're a kid.
How many kids do you have?
2.
Oh, you have 2.
Sons.
All right, so they must, do they like writing?
No, the older one likes politics, and the younger one likes guitar, he likes music. They're not particularly inclined toward writing. My older son he's 20 now, and he's read this book. But he's probably just at an age where he would be interested enough in that. I don't know that the 16-year-old would be. Although actually some of his friends have read it. So.
What does your older son say about the book?
Oh, he gives it 5 stars.
Good. That's good. He knows he has to.
He has to. No, he liked the book very much.
Oh, good, with no conflict.
He actually, yeah, I mean, he really got the sensibility of the book, and I'm sure that comes from being around me all the time. But he understood that it's meant to be, you know, human, as I said earlier, and witty. I hope that, you know, it has a lot of humor in it. I think, and so he kind of got it on that level, which was gratifying.
Do you know Jeff Tamarkin and Carolyn Levitt? Husband
No.
and wife, New Jersey. They're writers.
No.
Jeff edited me and another colleague. We were in the car and Three Dog Night came on.
Yeah.
We had interviewed them for Goldmine, a national magazine. Well, Jeff was an editor at Goldmine. He and his wife write books. He says they go upstairs, they have one room for Carolyn, one for Jeff, and they pound away at their books.
Yeah.
I don't know how you and your wife managed the...
It's like that. Yeah, we just go into separate parts of the apartment and just work. Yeah.
On your stuff. And
Yeah.
do each other trade off or look
You know,
at the...
we used to when we were younger, but it just became so consuming that now you know, my wife didn't read this book until it was in hardcover and she had time. You know, it's like it was sitting around the apartment for a couple of weeks. Yeah, I mean, she could have read the galley, she could have read the manuscript at any point, and it was just kind of, it just felt natural to just wait until the book is out, because I'm still changing it, things are still being done. You know, you can see the thing when it's finally out. She just had a book out last month, a novel, which I haven't gotten to yet, but I will, because I was waiting for it to come out in that hardcover.
That's funny, isn't it? I mean, one would think you'd want to look at some of the chapters or...
Well, I've heard her read from it, I know what it is.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah, yeah.
Can we say the name of it, or?
Sure, it's called The Uncoupling, and her name is Meg Wolitzer.
And is it, it's fiction?
It's fiction. It's
Okay.
a novel, yes.
Oh, that's tremendous. You have writer friends, and I mean, it sounds like a wonderful atmosphere to bring kids up in.
I think so. I think it is. Yeah, yeah. I think they're very fortunate.
That way, they're not just lost in the video games.
Yeah, there's that.
That happens.
I don't want to lock you out. I get
Oh, that's fine.
chatting because
I was interested in just maybe going back and touching on the sociology of science.
Uh-huh.
And one of the things that, you know, I'll ask, this is, you know, just kind of an opinion, do you think there'll ever be a time when we really have, maybe not full knowledge, but a full body of knowledge of how the cosmos work, how the Big Bang, you know, interacts with gravitation and all of those attendant kind of theories? Do you think there'll be a merge of those theories, and will man ever solve that?
You know, I don't think it matters what I think. I mean, and I don't mean that in a flip way.
Yeah.
I mean that there are people who are working on this who I don't think would be willing to commit themselves one way or the other. So I wouldn't presume to wade into that and say, yes, I think that it will. But given that, there are people who have been working on what they would call a unified theory of everything, a grand unified theory. The problem is that there are two branches in 20th century physics. One is general relativity, and the other is the quantum world. And general relativity does an extraordinary job of describing the universe on our scale and bigger. Quantum mechanics does an extraordinary job of describing the subatomic world. The two don't match. You can't get the two to match, which is why when we talk about something like what we casually refer to as the Big Bang, or you were saying earlier, the singularity, they have to use these terms because once you get down to that level, or what goes on inside a black hole, it's the same kind of thing, the equations break down and they can't get the two to match. They can't get general relativity to match with quantum mechanics. Einstein was aware of the problem. He worked on it for the last 30 years of his life. Didn't get anywhere. People have been working on it since then. Dark energy, in a way, it makes it has actually accelerated the research into this, the need to solve the problem. The problem was there; people were trying to solve it. But if you're going to understand dark energy, then it really is operating at kind of both extremes. You're going to have to understand something about the quantum world to make sense of this this detection that is that people detected by looking, 7 billion light years away, 7 billion years into the past. So you're dealing with that kind of scale, but in order to understand it, you're going to have to understand these kinds of things that I was talking about earlier, these virtual particles and things popping into and out of existence. So it's,
Do you think that's within mankind's ability to do that?
I think yes, but I think it is. But the question that you were asking a couple of minutes ago reminded me. I was hesitant about answering it because while I can say that we might be able to wed those two theories, again and again we've seen in science that when we get the breakthrough that we've been waiting for, that it really opens more doors.
Right.
So I don't know if there ever comes a point where you ask a question and you get an answer and the answer doesn't lead to two more questions. And so it's this kind of that's just the way the
chain of discovery that may be unending in itself.
Right, right. Yep. Because it opens up something that you hadn't anticipated. I mean, people, as I said, in this book is about, part of it is about these two teams that are trying to solve the problem of how is the universe going to end. And they thought that they had the means for it. And they were saying, is it as I said earlier, is the expansion slowing down, or is it collapsing back on itself? And they found out this extraordinary result, which basically says all bets are off. So they got the answer, but they got a million new questions with the answer.
Is the book going to be published in different languages?
It is. It's I think it has 9 or 10 foreign sales. There's British, which is almost a different language, but they will change, color to OUR.
Okay.
And change elevator to lift. But there's also German, Polish, Romanian, Russian, Japanese, Portuguese, but only for Brazil, Italian. I'm leaving something out. Serbia, something like that.
So as a writer, you have to have faith that these people can translate you without misconstruing intent,
Yes.
as well as the literal,
Yeah.
what you're saying. And it's tough. How do you write this into Japanese and get the whole gist of it?
I have no idea. I have no idea. Although at one point in the book, I mentioned, very early on, a saying or something that the American writer Flannery O'Connor, short story writer, great writer, once said, and I quote it in passing in the book. And it's completely non-scientific. It's just something that she said that I felt was germane about storytelling. And I got an email from my editor a few months ago saying that the Japanese publisher wants permission to put photographs in the book. And this book doesn't have photographs, and it doesn't for a very specific reason, which is that I'm trying to force myself to explain things in a way that I don't want the reader to say, I don't get it, I need to see a picture, I need to see a graph.
Which is why I pulled up this.
Oh.
Which, what I showed you earlier,
Oh, yeah,
someone
right,
having
yeah,
a
yeah.
pyramid,
Right.
which I thought was a cool idea
It
to
is,
kind of
yeah.
explain.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there isn't a right or a wrong way to do it,
Yeah.
but it's a personal preference for me. And I've talked to people who disagree, and I've talked to people who say, I'm so glad that there aren't graphs in here, because that would scare me.
There
Anyway,
are two
so-
images. There's the cover,
Well,
and then there's a picture of you.
yeah.
But the cover's kind of interesting.
The cover's great. I love the cover. I love the cover. And if you want to really blow your mind, and you have a copy of the book, you're not going to be able to see this on TV, but if you look at the side, there's a little line down the side, and if you turn it in the light, you'll see that it changes colors.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I
It's
didn't notice that.
So
Yeah,
you can,
that's
you
terrific.
can blow your mind with that. So if this was the 60s, you'd be having lots of fun.
So there's 4 colors, one for each percent.
Is it?
No, I'm
no.
just,
Oh, okay.
I'm the host.
But so the Japanese publisher wanted to add things, and they sent me sample pages, and there's a drawing of Copernicus and a drawing of Galileo and a photograph of Einstein and a photograph of Flannery O'Connor. I went, that is great. Flannery O'Connor is going to be in a cosmology book. I'm happy with that.
But at least they had the good grace to show you,
Yeah.
they were gracious enough to show you.
Yeah, yeah.
Because it's your book, and to get your name on it. And I wonder what your name looks like in Japanese.
I have no idea. I mean, I think I've had a Japanese sale before, and I'm sure I have it around the apartment, but I never tried to figure out which part of it is my name. Although sometimes, if you find yourself on Google and it's in the middle of Chinese and suddenly there's the word Richard Panek in the middle of all these pictograms, and
But it's still exciting for you to get these 9 languages,
yeah.
10 languages on your
Of course.
shelf, and
Oh,
you're
yeah.
communicating with people.
yeah, it's very exciting.
I could never speak German to them, and let alone a whole book.
Right.
So you're getting a whole book to these. That's mind blowing in itself.
It is. I agree.
So there are these little miracles from the cosmos that happen. That you've gotten people to, a lot of different people to work on different languages. That's fascinating. 10 different
Yeah.
other publications.
Yeah.
Wow.
I think it's an indication of what this kind of subject. Well, you asked me earlier about was I doing publicity for it. What I found, people don't necessarily know who I am, and they may not have heard of the book. But as I've given talks, I find that again and again they're oversubscribed. That there will be standing room only, and it's not because of me. And it's not because of the book. It's because of the subject. And I think that's why it got these 10 foreign sales, because you hear about this. Or there was a woman who was I was signing books at the Smithsonian Air and Space, and there was the cashier was sitting there. She was looking at the inside front cover, and she's reading what the book is about, and she suddenly goes, "That's crazy!" And I thought, that's just about right. So I think that's probably why people come out to hear about the subject, because they hear about it and they go, "That's crazy. How can that be true?" And it is.
It's crazy to them.
It's crazy to the scientists. Yeah.
So it's all just throwing marbles on a table like the I Ching and just, coming up with, are there equations really?
You're the host, so I'll
Yeah, well, are there equations really, equations are 10 years from now, will something upended? We don't know.
No, we don't know, but there are equations that match this, and we come up with the 4% and 73% dark energy and 23% dark matter. Those numbers don't come from nowhere. They come from observations that people have made of the cosmic microwave background, which is the echo of the Big Bang, which means that everything that was there 380,000 when the universe was 380,000 years old is still here now, and you can look at that cosmic microwave background and you can map it, as people have done with increasing precision, and then you run computer simulations. What about a universe that would have 1% matter and 73% dark energy and 32% dark matter, or whatever? What would that universe look like? And it doesn't look anything like the observation. So you run these computer simulations. You run millions of computer simulations of different compositions of the universe, and then you match it up against what the observations of the cosmic microwave background are showing, and the one that matches the closest is this one that we're talking about here, 4%, 73%, 23%. So these numbers don't come from nowhere.
Maybe there's a universe next door, like Pacific Ocean, Atlantic Ocean, and then they start melting into each other. I don't know.
People are looking into that. They are. That's,
if there's a universe behind the universe.
Yes.
Or another dimension.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting concept, though. If you look out in the cosmos, you will find a backdrop of radiation that will account for all of the matter that existed and has existed in time.
That's right.
And we can read that
right.
in a way that gives us almost like an X-ray of
that's right.
what it was there, and how we model it to get there is really the proof in the pudding of these equations or these theories that have come up. That's very, very very interesting methodology.
Well, we were saying earlier, we were talking about the Big Bang, and the reason that people take it to give that, as I said, as generations changed, the old generation kind of died out, and that was willing to question the Big Bang. But the discovery of this radiation that we're talking about, the radiation is from, as I said, when the universe was about 380,000 years old, and had cooled enough that matter and energy could kind of go their separate ways, and that left an imprint on the sky, and that is available to us in microwaves now. So that's what people are looking at.
A billion years from now, Phil McCoy talking to Richard Panek is being viewed a billion years from now in some telescope on the other side.
Could be.
Just our conversation.
Could be.
We got to have a little levity.
Now, what is your theory, Richard, just personal theory? Do you believe that the observable galaxy and cosmos that we see now, and together with the dark matter and dark energy, do you think that that's all there is, or do you think we may be just seeing one component of a larger collection of galaxies, or a larger collection of mass of which we're just a subcomponent? So we're just seeing what we can observe, and there's really even beyond that.
I would kind of expect that to be the case, because that has consistently been the case, that we go, oh, that's all there is. Oh, nope, there's more. Oh, that's all there is. Oh, nope, there's more. And that has repeatedly been the case. Now, when you get to the level of the universe, we mentioned quantum theory before. And according to quantum theory, if you run the numbers, there should be 10 to the 500 universes. Because the universe would have come out of, we were talking about virtual particles popping into and out of reality, kind of quantum particles, that there would be a quantum fluctuation, and the universe would have come out of one of them. And if that's the case, in quantum theory, there is no such thing as nothing, that there's no such thing as empty space, that it has to be populated by these virtual particles. So if quantum mechanics is valid, and we have every reason to think it is, then that interpretation of the universe would then almost require that there be 10 to the 500 other universes. Yeah, and so this is beginning to verge on metaphysics, and some scientists don't like to take this seriously, but I've watched over the past 10 years. I mean, I liked it as a layman. I liked this idea, and I've watched over the past 10 years as more and more astronomers have come around to it and said it kind of does make sense, actually. I mean, at first they were so resistant, and then it's kind of like, well, it has a compelling logic behind it. We can't prove it. I mean, or we can't validate it. We can't falsify it, but we can play with it. We can begin to play with it.
If inflation did occur, then the entire universe was actually 10 septillion times the volume of what we see. It's an awful lot of data to have to sift through.
Yes. Aren't you glad you don't have to do it?
I thought my office is a mess. I mean, it's mind-blowing.
Well, your office might be a mess, and I'll tell you, the person who came up with the idea of inflation, I interviewed him once for Esquire magazine. He's at MIT. His name is Alan Guth, and his office was notoriously messy. It was like this deep in discarded boxes and things, except for one little path through it that got him to his desk and got his bicycle to where it rests against the bookshelves.
The sign of a creative mind.
Yes.
I have the greatest roommate in the world, the greatest, because I am very creative. And we'll leave it at that. We've got about 3 minutes left.
Okay.
Did I tell you it goes by very fast?
It goes very fast.
I could talk to you with Phil for another 3 hours, I think. We have a lot of questions.
Yeah.
So I'll defer to Phil.
In just reviewing this, I thought it was a terrific book. It was very, very technical, but at the same time, as someone like me who is a tangential kind of observer, I could follow the theories, and it was just a really good read, and I just enjoyed it quite a bit. I am always intrigued by how you take such a technical kind of subject matter and reduce it to something that's very readable, and the 4% universe does that.
Oh, thank you.
It piqued my interest terrifically in the subject. I knew it tangentially, but really sitting down and understanding some of the players, how it evolved, it really was a terrific book, and I congratulate you on that.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
I think you're getting people to think, and that's a good thing.
I think so, too. I'd like to think so, yeah.
And in different languages even. There could be, Jodie Foster could do the movie. It's like Contact,
Yes.
The 4% universe.
Hey, if anybody in Hollywood is watching.
Did you like
That's fine.
Contact?
I didn't see Contact.
Oh, because
I know, yeah.
That it's interesting because they get all this data, and John Hurt says to her, "You must think like an alien," and he starts looking at the data from another perspective, and maybe that's an approach at this conference you're at. Do they start looking in different ways?
Well, I think they're always trying to push themselves to think and look in different ways. Yeah. I mean, it's very difficult to know what you don't know, and that's the challenge.
We do a lot of different shows, Richard. It's a delight having you here today because this is stuff I know Phil is intrigued by it. I'd like to explore it more. We do a lot of music, a lot of film. Jodie Foster was on the show April 12th, and Gilbert Gottfried was here. So we have a lot of different book authors and film people. This is great for our audience to see this real, heavy material that intrigues everyone because you look up at the sky at night, and there it is. And now we're finding out that little bit that we see is part of a huge whole that might only be 4% of what really is out there.
Yeah.
Did I phrase that right for this audience?
I think so. Yeah.
We've got like 30 seconds left. Okay, if I could ask an autograph, anything else you'd like to say about the book, or
buy it?
No, we can't say that. We can't say that. Hey, it's a great book.
Thank you. Thank you.
Go to the library and pick up a copy at the library and read it. Go online and Google the name Richard Panek. Thank you very much for being on the show.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard.
Thanks.
We have an autograph.
Yes.
Thanks. And that's our show today. Richard Panek. My guest is Phil McCoy. And you can find us walking around Winchester talking about the stars and the universe. We've done that.
Many times, many times.
And I want to thank Anthony Gameri for being our director. I hope I said his name right. And Dave Gauthier, and all the wonderful people at WinCAM who make this all possible. And Richard, you're a great guest. You can come back
Thank you.
anytime.
Okay.
We can talk about Waterloo, Iowa.
someone is in a porn theater with their pants closed, I'd be really amazed. And so he was, you know, playing with Pee-wee, and they arrested him. And the worst thing that he said, I heard, was when they arrested him, he said, "No, I'm Pee-wee Herman," which is the worst thing, because it's, oh, we've arrested Pee-wee Herman, this is great. And I say in the book that, well, the worst thing would have been to say,